it is 12 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started, and anyone jumping on after the fact is welcome to just jump in and enjoy the presentation. My name is Diana Kelly, and I'm the president, excuse me, and CEO of CampCalNOW, RV Park and Campground Alliance. CampCalNOW is the association that represents all of the RV parks and campgrounds throughout the state of California. And we operate on our pillars of success, which are communications, advocacy, marketing, and programs. And we are very happy to have everyone joining us here today. It's a great presentation, and I know you're going to get a lot out of it. The subject of our webinar today is the ADA and making sure that your park is fully compliant with the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. Today we actually have two speakers. First we have Dan Rudderow. Dan is an attorney, and his law firm represents owners and managers of RV communities throughout California. Rudderow Law is also the lead legal counsel for our legal hotline program here at the association. And Dan's practice includes preparing rental agreements, park rules for parks, assisting with day-to-day management and operational issues, wink, wink, removals and evictions. And his firm also represents park communities in litigation cases, including eviction and rent control. And also joining us today is Jason James with MHRV ACE. And Jason is a Certified Access Specialist, or CASp inspector. Jason has literally performed hundreds of CASp inspections at RV parks throughout the state in his career that has spanned over a decade. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dan and Jason, and enjoy the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Ruttero. First of all, I want to thank Diana for inviting me to participate today in this CampCalNOW webinar. As Diana mentioned, I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law for, I suppose over 25 years now. Our law firm is a proud member of CampCalNOW. It's a wonderful organization and resource. Today, I'll be serving mostly as moderator. Today's program will last about 30 minutes or so, during which you can submit questions. And at the end of the presentation, we might go a little bit over. We have a lot of information today, but whenever we finish, probably around 12:35 or 12:40, we'll go through and take some of your questions. Hopefully we can get through all of them. If we don't get to your question, by all means, please reach out to Diana or myself or Jason offline after today's presentation, and we'd be happy to talk with you. We have a great program today, so let's get started. I'm very pleased to have here today Jason James, who is a CASp inspector. Welcome, Jason.
Hello.
And Jason, tell us a little bit about, what a CASp inspector is. I guess, what is actually CASp? Does it stand for Certified Access Specialist? And what kind of qualifications do you have to have? And what is it that you do generally?
Well, yeah, it stands for Certified Access Specialist. I am certified as an expert in the field of construction-related accessibility. It is a certification that's given out by the Department of State Architect. There's not a whole lot of us in the state. And I do inspections all over California, including a lot of RV parks and mobile home parks.
That's great. I'm moving the slide up to today's discussion. Today we're going to be discussing the benefits of having your RV community inspected by a CASp inspector. And I think that I just wanted to make a comment here at the beginning that it's important to understand that you want your community obviously to be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, not just so that your community is compliant with the law, but also because over the past several years, we have noticed a growing number of lawsuits that have been filed against property owners contending their businesses are not compliant with the ADA. Each year, ADA lawsuits cost property owners tens of thousands of dollars in claim payments and in paying legal fees to defend those lawsuits. In fact, just last week, I am part of a network of exchanging emails with different attorneys, and it just came up in our discussion last week with a bunch of attorneys from San Diego County and Orange County, and they were commenting about how they saw a lot of these ADA plaintiff law firms really developing a cottage industry. And that years ago, they would go from property to property or from mobile home park or RV park, and they would make claims mostly in the range of $4,000 or $5,000. Last week, the attorneys were commenting that they're seeing initial settlement demands more in the $25,000 to $27,000 range. So I think, as you'll see from today's presentation, the takeaway today is that a CASp inspection is one of those things that you can do proactively today to help ensure your property is ADA compliant, so that hopefully tomorrow you won't be sued in an expensive ADA legal action. So let me go on. So Jason, give us an overview of what you do, in the sense that I understand that you inspect properties such as RV parks to see if the property is compliant with the ADA laws, correct?
Yes, yes. So the ADA standards came out in 1991, and it is it's taken care of through litigation. There's no ADA police. There's nobody that comes out and checks you. It's all done through litigation, and there's no grandfather clause for it. So beyond the 1991 standards, so you have to comply with the 1991 standards, or you risk a lawsuit, is what happens. And most places built prior to 1991 were built to code, and people think that because they were built to code back then, that they're still to code now, and that's typically not the case.
Okay, so just by way of introduction, you actually physically yourself or one of your team members, you guys go out to a property and you actually walk the property and do a physical inspection to see if you can notice anything not compliant with the ADA, right?
Yes, that's right. The inspection's called a site survey. Either myself or one of our other inspectors on our team walk the park and doing the inspection. We make notes and take full photo documentation as to what issues we find and produce a report.
Okay, and I think we wanted to ask you, what are the most common things that you see, and what are the most common issues that come up during your inspections? And I think you were kind enough to give us some slides here of the different issues. I think you've given us 6 or 7 areas that you look at specifically, and that's awesome. Let's take them one by one. I think you were mentioning to me offline that parking signage is a big thing you look for.
Parking's huge. 90% of the lawsuits that I deal with have to do with parking. They can see parking as they drive by. They can see it from Google Earth. I tell everybody, if you do nothing else, get your parking right. So that's a really big thing. You want that nice fresh striping. You want the proper signage up there so that as they drive by, they see that. They typically assume everything else is good and they keep driving.
There are actually, in your experience, Jason, you actually have claimants or plaintiffs or law firms that are inspecting people's property on Google Earth to look at the handicap parking spaces?
That's speculation, but I'm pretty sure of it, yes.
Okay. Then the next topic is on the middle slide here, the middle picture is parking space. What are some of the issues that you're looking at when you come out to do an inspection for a client?
I check the slope. I check the dimensions of the parking space and the slope of the ground. You want your ground surface to slope 2% or less in all directions through the entire parking space. The dimensions, it basically takes up 2 whole parking spaces for your first one, which, because it has to be a van accessible space, which requires a bigger loading and unloading aisle next to it.
Okay, and then accessible routes. Tell us a little bit about what you're looking for to protect the property owner regarding claims about accessible routes.
We're looking for slopes again. You want your you want the grade to be less than 5% in the direction of travel, less than 2% perpendicular. Unless you've got a ramp, then it can go a little bit steeper with handrails. RV parks is kind of a different animal with path of travel, because DG is considered an accessible path of travel. And so RV parks, you want the dirt, the DG, to be compacted pretty well for accessible routes. And that means an accessible route from basically the accessible campsite to the shower rooms, or to the office, or to any parking, or to the pool or the rec center. It doesn't have to be the entire RV park. It doesn't have to be part of the accessible route.
Interesting.
You need to be able to get to the amenities.
So interesting. You said, I think you said DG. What is DG?
Decomposed gravel, decomposed granite. It goes down pretty tight and pretty fine on a ground surface. It's a really tight dirt that's compacted well. If you shuffle your feet, you will kick some of it up. You can make it kind of tough for wheelchairs to get through, but it doesn't produce a thick mud when it rains.
Okay, okay. And I think we've got a couple other areas you always are looking at when you go out and do your CASp inspection. Tell us a little bit about ramps. We've got here missing or improper slope, no handrails, wrong length. I imagine that the current ADA laws have certain requirements in all those areas regarding ramps.
Yeah, and ramps are kind of a big deal at RV parks also. Most RV parks that I've inspected their office, their lobby is in a trailer, or a mobile home type trailer. So it sits a few feet off the ground. You've got a ramp going up to it. So you want to get your ramps right. You want them to have a smooth floor surface. So if you've got wood planks laying across, you want to lay a runner down, not just a cloth runner, a nice grip tape runner down the middle of it. You want nice handrails going up and down it. And you want to make sure the slope isn't more than 8.3%, which is 1 in 12. For one inch of height, 1 inch of rise, you need 1 foot of length, is what that is.
Do you see this issue come up pretty often with RV parks on ramps?
Yes, a lot, yes.
Yeah. Okay, and tell us a little bit about doors. We've got doors here. I guess you're looking at doors, you're looking at the wrong width, the improper hardware, missing kick plate. There's a whole set of laws about how, is this the door, I guess, both to the park manager's office and the clubhouse or recreational facility?
Yes, yeah, all those doors, any doors that are part of the public accommodation, which means they go to the rec room, the restrooms, the gate, the leasing office, they all need to be compliant. You want a 36-inch door in width, and that way when it's open 90 degrees, you get 32 inches of clear width through the opening. For hardware, you want lever type hardware. Knobs are bad. They require twisting of the wrist. On the push side of the door, if you don't have a smooth door, or if it's a gate, you need to have a kick plate that comes up to at least 10 inches above the ground. And that's so that they can push it open with their feet without their feet or their pedals getting caught in the rails or the pickets of a gate.
And then tell us just a few things about what you're looking for egress signage, missing or incorrect signage. I guess there's the set of laws under the ADA that you have to have a certain amount of signage, and has to contain the Braille and other language. And tell us a little bit what is wrong language.
Well, door signage requires Braille, and it'll be at doors. Otherwise, directional signage that you would put outside that would show people the accessible route. If you've got two different directions they can go and one of them leads to the accessible facilities, and all you would need is a picture of the little guy in the wheelchair with the arrow pointing the right direction. Signage is, you want it to be visible. You don't want it, sitting behind trees or anything like that. And it's required at restrooms, anywhere that anywhere that there's a junction between an accessible route or a regular walkway, or at exit doors is where you want it.
Okay, great. And what is the wrong language?
There really isn't a wrong language as long as you've got visible signage with the what's called the International Symbol of Accessibility on it. You don't want it, one thing you don't want it to say handicap or handicapped on it. That's considered offensive now. And it states that in the ADA standards. But usually, most signage that you'll get has no words at all on it. It just has a picture with an arrow, or it's got symbols for doors. Except for exit signage, it'll say exit with Braille underneath it. And most of the time, signage with words will have Braille below the words.
Okay. And then we have a couple other things we want to hit on today during the presentation. Talk to us briefly about counters. And thank you for this photograph. That looks like a library, but it's great to kind of understand what you're looking at, because something like that, I could see a counter like that that she's standing at to be at an RV park office. So I guess they have to have certain heights and widths if you have a counter.
Yeah, hotels, you go into hotels, you go into RV park lobbies, leasing offices, places like that, they'll have a counter that's usually about 40 inches high. And that's too high. So you want to have a counter, or at least a part of the counter that's 36 inches long, that's no higher than 34 inches. So that someone in a wheelchair can approach it, either forward approach or parallel approach, depending on the knee space underneath it. When people do stop looking to file a lawsuit, that's one of the second or third most common items that I see is the counter. They can walk in, snap a picture, and leave. And it's pretty easy to know if it's too high or not without even measuring it.
Yeah, interesting. Well, they can just kind of know it from the photograph without coming in with their tape measure, huh?
Yes.
Okay. And tell us about restrooms and stairs. What are the things that you look for when you're doing a CASp inspection at an RV park with regard to restrooms and stairs?
Well, restrooms at RV parks, you'll have the restroom facilities with showers. You have to have at least one accessible shower. An accessible shower is quite a bit bigger than the other showers in there. So a lot of times they lose use of one of their showers. You have to have an accessible stall, which needs to be 60 inches wide. So a lot of times they will lose one stall trying to widen one to make it big enough. Restroom lawsuits extremely common and can be very costly. The counters can't be any higher than 34 inches. All of your accessories need to be no higher than 40 inches high. The bottom of your mirror, your paper towel dispensers, your soap dispenser. And it seems really low because since when you walk into most restrooms, they keep them at about 48 to 60 inches. But that is what's required. The pipes underneath your sinks all need to be wrapped and insulated. And these are all things that, like I said, someone just walking around looking for something to file against you on, they can see pretty easily, and they can walk in, take a quick picture, get in and out of there pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah. And then I don't know if you see a lot of stairs in RV parks, just in the sense that you have park offices and maybe adjacent clubhouses and pool areas. But if you've got stairs, you've got issues that you look at with the stairs as well.
Yeah, you have to have handrails at the stairs. They have to have extensions at the top and the bottom, horizontal extensions that go at least a foot. And then exterior stairs, every step has to have a stripe on it, a contrasting stripe.
Okay. And then swimming pools. And I know offline I was talking to you about this. I've never quite understood the whole thing about the chairlift. I have community pools where I live where we don't have any chairlifts, and yet you'll go on a cruise ship and there'll be a chairlift, and you'll go to an RV park and there'll be a chairlift. What are the rules regarding whether or not a community needs to have a lift chair or not?
Well, RV parks are considered transient lodging, just like hotels. The pool at your HOA or at an apartment building or at a mobile home park is not considered that. That pool is only for the guests or the residents and their guests only. So at an RV park, everything is a public accommodation, including the pool, which means you have to have a lift. You have to accommodate any disability that there may be with everything there is. That's why it goes back to things as minute as door hardware. And that means you have to have a lift at the pool, and if you have a jacuzzi, you have to have a separate lift at the jacuzzi. You cannot have a portable lift that you can pull out of the closet whenever someone asks for it, because that is, by the letter of the law, considered to be discrimination. If someone has to go to the lobby, ask for the lift to be pulled out so that they can use it. So it has to be there and ready to be used at any given time.
Interesting. I was just going to ask you about that, about this photograph, a cover that's on that part of it. Based on what you said, that's got to be ready to be used at any point. Is it still okay under the law to have the entire thing, the entire chair covered with a cover?
Yes, you can leave it covered because the cover is removable. You can't leave it covered if you have a cable with a lock at the bottom of it. But a lot of covers are easily removable with a zipper. You unzip it and it pulls right off. And you are allowed to leave it covered for maintenance purposes. You know, these things will rot pretty quickly in some of the weather that we have here in California.
Yeah, you were saying offline to me, I think earlier, that the uncovered chair attracts a lot of kids who are playing in the pool and maybe climbing all over the chair, and maybe the cover prevents the kids from gravitating towards wanting to play with the chair.
Oh yeah, it's like an amusement park ride.
Yeah. And then for our listeners, I was asking, since this was a CampCalNOW presentation for our RV communities, I was asking Jason if he could give us some examples of things he's seen over the years with regard to RV parks. And I think, Jason, we just have 2 slides. One of them is bathrooms, and the other one is parking spaces. And I think I pulled up the bathroom one first. Are these, was this an issue having to do at an RV park?
Yes, yeah, these are straight out of RV parks that I've inspected. You can see just by looking at the showers, one of them has a curb going up. It's not accessible. They need to be able to get the whole wheelchair into the shower and transfer into the seat. And so a seat sitting there for them and a long hose doesn't quite do it. Now, in theory, it may for most disabled people. Most of them can get around, but we're looking at a set of codes that are they're written to make it very easy on them, and people are quick to sue if they find. I'm not saying disabled people are quick to sue. I'm saying that the people that want to sue you are very quick to do it when they find stuff like this. What's in these pictures?
Do you, on the little seat in the left side photograph, you're not required by law to provide a seat for a shower, or are you?
Yes, you are required to provide a seat for the shower.
Oh, okay. Okay. And can that seat be like that, I guess? I mean, it can be outside of the shower?
For certain alternative size showers, which I could get into if you want me to put everyone to sleep, you are allowed to have a portable seat, but most of the time you have to have a built-in seat that's attached to the wall.
Okay. Okay. All right. Very good. Let me then go to the other photographs of an RV park you gave us. This looks like it has to do with handicap parking. I know we're not supposed to use the word handicap, but the parking and the markings on the ground. What were the issues at this RV community that you were noticing and working on?
The issues here aren't that bad. You've got, we've got some, what I wanted to show was some of the conversations that we had. They had talked about, you and I talked about RV parks not wanting to lose the character of an RV park by putting concrete or asphalt in everywhere. And so what I wanted to show is in the, what you've got here is 2 accessible parking spaces that are right next to the facilities, right next to the rec room. And then over on the far right picture, you've got it right next to the hotel rooms. What I've seen a lot, and you can't really tell in the picture all the way to the left, but that is the only piece of concrete on that RV park. And it's all DG all around there, decomposed granite. So they didn't lose the character. They provided for a disabled person. You can see that it's right next to the restrooms. And I just wanted to provide examples of that it can be done without paving the entire park.
Okay. Okay, very good. Now, I know offline you and I had a discussion about CASp inspections of a mobile home park versus a RV park, and it's kind of interesting. You have the ability, or under the law, you can comply with the law to do what they call a path of travel inspection with mobile home parks, where you can do an inspection from the front entrance of the mobile home park all the way up to the park office without necessarily having to do the entire mobile home park. But you were telling me offline earlier that the rules are different with RV parks, that the entire RV park needs to be inspected. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, RV parks are considered transient lodging. So they fall under the same category as a hotel. A mobile home park, the only thing, and an apartment building as well, the only thing required to be accessible is the leasing office and any path of travel to the leasing office. So the leasing office is the only public accommodation when it comes to a mobile home park or an apartment building. With an RV park, it's transient. Anything that is any lease agreement that's less than 29 days is considered transient lodging. In RV parks, that's what it mostly is. So everything needs to be accessible, every public accommodation. All the guests are able to use the pool, the rec room, the shower rooms. So you need to provide accessibility, and you need to provide accessible facilities at all of these areas when it comes to RV parks.
And just out of curiosity, I realize that obviously different RV parks are different sizes throughout California, but typically how long will it take you to walk an RV park and do your inspection?
It depends on the size, but the average one takes an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Okay. Now, as part of the service that you provide in doing a CASp inspection is that you physically go out and do the inspection and take your notes. But also for your service, I understand that after your inspection, you provide the client with a formal CASp report. Can you tell us a little bit about what you include in the CASp report?
The CASp report includes everything that needs to be corrected to become fully accessible. We take a ton of photos on the property, which the client has every right to if they request them. But we only put in the report items that need to be corrected. And we put pictures of all the findings and recommendations on the easiest way to correct these findings. If we see an easier way, a less expensive way, we do provide recommendations for all that.
Great. And Jason, I was talking to you earlier about how I, at the law firm, get a lot of client questions that clients ask me. How much of this stuff can be grandfathered in? And I think you were talking about that a little bit at the beginning of our webinar, but generally speaking, what's the rules on, something doesn't comply with the ADA and you can grandfather it in and don't have to repair it, or no, you've got to rip something out and you have to repair it or make it compliant with the ADA today?
Well, as I was saying before, the first ADA standards came out in 1991, and they required at the time that every facility come into compliance with those standards as a minimum. The new standards came out in 2010, which were a lot more stringent. There's a lot more that needs to be done. They've studied over those 10 years and learned a lot. But what there is now is there's safe harbor. So if you came into compliance with the 1991 standards, you are not required to come into full compliance with the 2010 standards. Anything that does not comply with the 91 standards, so must be brought into compliance with the most current standard there is.
Okay. And then you were saying that with your CASp report, you'll go over the CASp report with your client, with the park owner, and discuss any repairs that really do need to be made. And you can help them with finding contractors to make those repairs.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we have contractors. I only refer experienced contractors that I have had experience with and know them not to make me look bad.
Okay, that's a good business practice. Okay, and then I also understand in terms of everything that the client is getting for your CASp inspection, they're getting the inspection itself, and they also receive a report, but they also receive a CASp certificate. And I think this is a picture of the CASp certificate. Can you tell us what this is, who's it issued by, does it include serial numbers, and can it be put in the front window, and what does that do, and how can that help you perhaps avoid a lawsuit?
It's issued by the state, and it's watermarked, and yes, each one has its own serial number. You put it in the window. It doesn't say that you're fully compliant, but it does say that you've been inspected and you know what needs to be done and that you are in the process of becoming compliant. And it works as a repellent, basically. If somebody is driving around looking for some low-hanging fruit and they see that in the window, they'll usually move on to the next one. In state lawsuits, you are considered a qualified defendant with one of these, and that grants you some legal rights against accessibility related lawsuits, such as you get a 90-day stay of execution and an early mandatory settlement conference. The 90-day stay of execution means that the plaintiff's attorneys can't run up attorney fees for those 90 days. And the bulk of what you pay in one of these settlements is attorney fees. So typically in my experience, once a lawsuit is filed, if you show them that you're a qualified defendant, they typically drop the lawsuit. It's not worth it for them to pursue it.
Okay, great. So wow, that's kind of incredible. The CASp inspection and the CASp report can help you not only avoid getting sued potentially, especially if they see your certificate in the window, but getting the CASp inspection done can actually help you perhaps as a defendant in the lawsuit after you're sued.
Yes, yes, and it also reduces the damages from 4,000 per occurrence to 1,000 per occurrence. So yes.
It has all of that value. And then finally, I understand that there's certain tax incentives or tax credits. Can you just briefly tell our listeners what your understanding is of some of the tax incentives with a CASp inspection?
Yeah, of course. It's something you'll want to review with your accountant, but what you get is you up to $10,000 being spent on ADA upgrades per year. You get half of that back in a credit. So it's not just a write-off. You get to write off that $10,000 and then you get a credit for 50% of what you spend up to $10,000 in a year. It's a pretty good deal.
Well, that's great. Okay, so I think that is our program, but I wanted to now log on here to my screen and see if I can pull up any of the questions for you, Jason. So we do have some questions. Let's see. I'm just going to read them to you, Jason, and you'll just have to field them here and try to understand what the listener was meaning. The first question is, what communication, signage, and verbal do you recommend as non-compliant issues are being addressed, or as non-compliant issues are being addressed? And I guess I'm not quite understanding the question, but let's talk about for a second about how long do people have to make the repairs that are in your report? And I suppose it varies depending on how extensive the repairs need to be, right?
Yeah, California Civil Code states that you're allowed with a quote reasonable amount of time. What's reasonable differs from case to case. If all you've got to do is some signage and maybe a handrail or something like that, I say get it done as quickly as possible in up to 6 months. If it becomes an issue of regrading or paving or something like that, a reasonable amount of time could be as much as 3 years.
Okay.
So as far as signage to post while you are making the repairs, there are signs that I've seen people post with we basically saying open during construction. We're doing upgrades to make our site more accessible to people with disabilities. Things like that. I don't have a sign per se that I can recommend.
Sure. It dovetails nicely with the next question, which is a great question. One of our listeners said, are the CASp reports discoverable? What liability does a report like this create for an RV park that would like to phase in these repairs or changes? And thank you for that question. You should consult not only with your CASp inspector, but with your park attorney. There are ways of basically running that CASp report through your attorney so that the attorney is asking for that report and will make that report attorney work product privilege. So that's an excellent question. We have clients say, you know, if I get the report done and don't get these repairs done for a while and get sued, I'm basically handing them my CASp report, and that could be bad for me in a lawsuit. So there are ways of making your CASp report privileged so that it wouldn't be discoverable later on in a ADA lawsuit. Next question was, Jason mentioned DG is accessible. What about gravel?
Gravel, no. Gravel is not accessible. It moves around too much. An accessible route isn't supposed to have variations or abrupt changes in elevation of more than a ½ inch at any point. And when you go with gravel, I've never seen it packed in tight enough that you could move a wheelchair without the wheels digging in.
Okay, and then he had a follow-up question. Are wood chips, bark considered accessible?
No, for the same reason, they're not.
Okay. Next question. If your pre-1991 handicap parking is in 3 areas and all 3 fail to meet current standards, can you move all parking to consolidate it to 1 area as a means of fixing all areas? That is, remove 2 of the 3 problem areas and just make 1 of the areas compliant.
Most of the time, yes. There are cases where it can't be done. I would have to see it and see what the plan is for it to be done. If you've got your amenities spread all over the park and you want to move all of the accessible parking to the leasing office, probably won't work.
Okay.
People, but I would have to see. There are cases, many cases where it is fine.
Next question. What is the average fine or range of fines for non-compliance with ADA regulations in a RV park?
It depends on who's suing you. There's a law firm down in San Diego that starts at requesting $20,000 plus for damages, you know, the minute they file a lawsuit. There's other law firms that start at about 6,000 or 8,000. And it goes anywhere from there. And depending on what they find, sometimes they'll ask for a lot more if they can find enough to really stick it to you.
Okay. And next question, once a park is aware of non-compliance issues and is making reasonable efforts to cure any issues cited in the report, is there a grace period to complete the work, or are they still liable to fines while making repairs?
Unfortunately, there's no real grace period written in stone. In the report, there is, at the very end of the reports that I give, there is a timeline that we can go over and help you fill the timeline out for what's reasonable. If you're making the repairs and you've got a report and you are progressing on schedule, usually that's enough that they're not going to pursue the lawsuit. They're gonna let it drop, because the judge will side with you almost 100% of the time if you're making the repairs, even if you're taking a little longer than you're supposed to be. Some of these law firms, they know that they're not asking for very much, and they'll pursue it knowing that it's easier for you to pay them than pay an attorney. You know, and it just becomes a nuisance lawsuit at that point.
Yeah. Next question, could a tenant at a mobile home park contact the state, such as the Department of Community Development, HCD, to compel you to correct non-compliance, and could you be fined by the state if that were to happen?
This is at a mobile home park?
Yeah.
Mobile home parks, you have what's called reasonable accommodations. They cannot force you, per the FHA guidelines, they cannot force you to do anything unreasonable. But if they want to pay for it, if it's something such as putting in a pool lift, and they say they want a pool lift and they will pay for it, you can't refuse that. You have to allow that to happen as long as it does not reduce the value of your mobile home park at that time or in the future.
Interesting. Next question, are month-to-month only parks that do a month-to-month lease fall under the chairlift pool requirement? And I think that where this, I'm speculating, but where I think this listener is probably coming from is, you know, some RV parks have some pretty transient people living there, you know, maybe, you know, an RV person comes in and rents a space for a couple of days or a few weeks with their family. And then there are RV parks that can actually have people who stay for years. and certain RV residents who actually get a lot of legal protections against eviction if they've been there over 9 months. So, but in your world, like the lift pool requirement, if you had RV residents, where I gave you a hypothetical that all the RV residents lived in the park for more than a year, does that necessarily change your analysis of what you say in your report about having to have a chairlift in the pool?
Yes. Anything over 29 days is considered a long-term lease, and that changes you from transient lodging to basically a mobile home park or under that category. So yes, it would change. It changes the rules on what you are required to do.
So when you do an inspection, are you interviewing the park manager about how long the residents stay at a park, more or less than 29 days?
Yes. Yes. Yes, I do ask those questions of the park manager.
And then if it's more than 29 days, then do you still have to inspect the entire RV park, or can you just do the path of travel?
I can do just the path of travel. It would just involve the leasing office and any guest parking.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't know about the 29-day kind of cutoff point. That's interesting. So Jason, I understand that you're affiliated with ACE, and MHRV ACE is your website, and I believe you have rates for your fee, how much you charge to do an RV park. I also understand, Jason, that you are willing to give a $100 discount for any on the price to any CampCalNOW members, correct?
Yes. Yes, that is correct.
All right. I think that's it. I'm scrolling down. Go ahead.
Maybe somebody asked a question in the chat.
Let me just see. It's about 13 minutes till 1. Let me see if there were any other questions in the chat box.
There we go.
Yeah, the question I'm getting in chat box was the same about the pool lift, so I'm not seeing anything new there.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Diana, and thank you.
Yes, Dan and Jason, thank you so much for providing this for our members. I think it's a huge service, and I'm really looking forward to the next one that we have coming up next month.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks. Everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.